My name is Emma Richardson. I just turned 18 3 months ago, and I thought becoming the class valedictorian would be the moment that finally made my father proud of me. Instead, it became the moment I sent him to prison for attempted murder. The morning of graduation should have been perfect. I had woken up at 5:30, my burgundy valedictorian stole already pressed and hanging on my door, my speech cards color-coded and memorized down to every pause for emphasis. 4 years of straight-A's, 5 AP classes with perfect scores, captain of the debate team, volunteer work at the hospital every weekend, everything had led to this moment. I was supposed to stand in front of 500 people and talk about perseverance, about how hard work pays off, about the bright futures waiting for all of us. Instead, I woke up to the sound of my mother screaming. It was not an unusual sound in the Richardson household. If you had asked me at age 6 what my mother sounded like, I would have described her screams before her laugh. By age 10, I had learned to differentiate between the types: the sharp, surprised yelp when he grabbed her hair, the long, wailing cry when he used his fists, the muffled, choking gasps when his hands found her throat. That morning, it was the third type. I found them in the kitchen. My father, Daniel Richardson, respected real estate developer and church deacon, had my mother pressed against the refrigerator, his hands wrapped around her throat. Her feet were barely touching the ground. Coffee maker was still gurgling, filling the room with the absurd normalcy of fresh brew while my mother's face turned purple. "Dad, stop!" I screamed, grabbing his arm. "Please, it is graduation day." He released her with a shove that sent her crashing into the counter. She gasped for air, clutching her throat, tears streaming down her face. There were fresh bruises already blooming on her neck, perfect finger-shaped marks that would be impossible to cover with makeup. "Your mother decided to embarrass me," he said calmly, straightening his tie. "She wanted to invite her sister to your graduation. That woman who has been filling her head with poison about leaving me. On today of all days, she chooses to disrespect me." Mom was still gasping, trying to form words. She is my sister, Dan. She just wanted to see Emma." The backhand came so fast I almost missed it. Mom's head snapped to the side, blood immediately flowing from her split lip. "You do not speak unless I give you permission," he said, his voice never rising above conversational level. That was the thing about my father. He never yelled when he hit her. He was calm, methodical, like violence was just another business transaction. "And you, Emma, need to remember something. Everything you have achieved is because of me. Private tutors, the SAT prep courses, the application fees for all those colleges. I made you what you are. So today, you will give your little speech, you will thank your family for their support, and you will not embarrass me." "Understood." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, Dad." "Good. Now go get ready. We leave in 2 hours. And Maria," he looked at my mother, who was dabbing at her bloody lip with a dish towel, "you will make yourself presentable. I will not have people talking." As I walked back to my room, I heard him continue. "If you embarrass me today, Maria, if you do anything to ruin Emma's moment, I will kill you when we get home. And this time, I will not stop when you pass out. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Daniel," my mother whispered. I stood in my room, staring at my speech cards. The foundation of success: family, faith, and fortitude. That was my title. I was supposed to talk about how my family's support had built the foundation for my achievements. The words seemed to mock me now. But something else was on my dresser too, my phone, fully charged, with the recording app one had been using for the past 3 months. You see, when I turned 18, something shifted in me. Maybe it was the college acceptance letters that proved I could have a life beyond this house. Maybe it was the scholarship offers that meant I would not need his money anymore. Or maybe it was just that I finally understood that being a legal adult meant my testimony would carry more weight in court. Whatever it was, I had started documenting everything. Videos of bruises, recordings of threats, photos of broken furniture, holes in walls, blood on the kitchen floor that Mom frantically cleaned before anyone could visit. I had filled 3 cloud storage accounts with evidence. But I had been waiting, planning, trying to figure out the safest way to get Mom out without him killing her first. I picked up my phone and opened the recording from that morning. His threat was crystal clear. "I will kill you when we get home." California, that was a credible threat of violence, especially with his history. It was enough for an emergency protective order. It was enough for an arrest. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts to Detective Sarah Chen. She had given me her card 6 months ago when the neighbors called the police during one of Dad's episodes. Mom had refused to press charges as always, but Detective Chen had pulled me aside. "If you ever need help," she had said, pressing the card into my hand, "day or night, you call me. Sometimes it takes time to be ready. I will be here when you are." I typed out a text. "He threatened to kill her today. I have it recorded. Graduation at Riverside High, 10 a.m. He will be there." Her response was immediate. "How many exits?" 6. "He always sits front row, center. Are you safe right now?" "Yes. We leave for graduation in 90 minutes. Emma, listen carefully. Can you wear a wire? We need real-time audio if we are going to do this safely." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "Yes. I am sending Officer Martinez to your neighbor's house. Go for a walk in 15 minutes. She will be in a blue Honda Civic. Get in, get wired, and go back home like nothing happened. Can you do that?" "Yes. Emma, you are brave. We will keep you both safe." I deleted the conversation and got dressed in my graduation outfit, a white dress that Mom had saved for months to buy, my valedictorian stole, and my honor cords. I looked in the mirror and saw a girl who had everything going for her. Perfect grades, perfect future, perfect family. The lie of it all made me want to scream. "Emma!" Dad called. "Come here and let me see you." I walked downstairs, my phone recording in my pocket. He was in the living room, adjusting his cufflinks. Mom sat on the couch, having covered the bruises on her neck with a silk scarf, her split lip hidden under carefully applied lipstick. "Beautiful," he said, but his eyes were cold. "You look like a Richardson. Remember that today. You represent this family. Everything you say reflects on me." "I understand, Dad." He walked over and put his hands on my shoulders. For a moment, I thought he might actually be proud of me. Then he squeezed, just hard enough to hurt. "I have worked too hard to build our reputation in this community for you to damage it with any silly emotional displays. You will thank your mother and me for our support. You will not mention any challenges or difficulties. We are a perfect family." "Say it." "We are a perfect family," I repeated. "Good. Now I need to make a quick call. So your mother will help you with your hair." As soon as he left the room, Mom rushed over to me, her hands fluttering around my face like wounded birds. "Emma, baby, you look so beautiful. I am so proud of you. So proud." Her voice was hoarse from the choking, barely above a whisper. "You are going to do amazing things. You are going to get out of here and—" She stopped, seeming to realize what she had said. "Mom," I said quietly, "I need to go for a walk." To calm my nerves, her eyes widened in panic. "No, honey, your father wants us ready to leave." 15 minutes. "I will tell him you are doing my hair if he asks." "Please, Mom. I need this." She looked at me for a long moment, and I think she saw something in my eyes. Maybe she recognized the same desperation she had been carrying for 18 years. She nodded. I slipped out the back door and walked casually down the street. 3 houses down, the blue Honda Civic was waiting. Officer Martinez was a young woman, maybe 25, with kind eyes and steady hands. "You are incredibly brave," she said as she helped me clip the tiny microphone inside my dress. "This transmits directly to our team. We will have officers in plain clothes throughout the ceremony and patrol cars standing by. The moment you give the signal, we move." "What is the signal?" Detective Chen said you are giving the valedictorian speech? Yes. When you are ready for us to move, say these exact words. Some families are built on love, others on fear. Can you remember that? Some families are built on love, others on fear. The words felt like weapons in my mouth. I can remember. The moment you say that, we will move in. It will be fast, it will be safe, and we will get your mother out. There will also be victim advocates there to help you both immediately after. Do you understand? Yes. She handed me a small device. Panic button. Press it if anything happens before the speech. We will come immediately. I tucked it into my bra, next to my heart that was beating like a hummingbird's wings. Thank you. Thank you for trusting us. You are saving your mother's life today. I walked back home, each step feeling like I was walking toward a cliff's edge. Dad was loading the car when I returned, his movements sharp and agitated. He had already had his morning whiskey. I could smell it from 5 feet away. Where were you? He demanded. Walking to calm my nerves. Mom said it was okay. He shot a glare at my mother, who was clutching her purse like a life preserver. Get in the car. Both of you. The drive to school was silent except for Dad's occasional muttered complaints about traffic, about the temperature, about Mom's breathing being too loud. I sat in the back, my hand pressed against the panic button, feeling the wire against my skin like a secret armor. Parking lot was already filling when we arrived. Families were streaming toward the football field where the ceremony would be held. I saw my classmates in their caps and gowns taking selfies, laughing, normal kids having a normal milestone. I envied them with an intensity that made my chest ache. Richardson. Mr. Patterson, my calculus teacher, waved us over. The star of the day. You must be so proud, Mr. Richardson. Dad's face transformed instantly into his public persona, warm, charming, the devoted father. We could not be prouder. Emma has always been exceptional. And Mrs. Richardson, Mr. Patterson turned to my mother, you must be over the moon. Yes, Mom managed, her voice still hoarse. Very proud. I saw Mr. Patterson's eyes flick to the scarf around her neck, to the careful makeup, to the way she stood slightly behind my father. Teachers always knew. They had to know. But knowing and doing something about it were different things. We made our way to the field. As predicted, Dad insisted on front row center seats. I want everyone to see us when you give your speech, he said. The Richardson family, front and center. I had to leave them to join my classmates in the staging area. As I walked away, I heard him grab Mom's wrist. Remember what I said. One wrong move and graduation will be your funeral. The other graduates were buzzing with excitement. My best friend Sarah found me immediately, throwing her arms around me. Can you believe it? We actually made it. You are going to kill it up there, Emma. Your speech is going to be perfect. If only she knew how imperfect it was about to become. Principal Williams found me in the crowd. Emma, you will be seated on stage with the other speakers. After the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem, I will introduce you. You have 10 minutes for your speech. Actually, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I have made some changes to my speech. It is more personal now. About overcoming challenges. She looked concerned. Changes? But we approved. Trust me, Mrs. Williams. It is going to be memorable. As I took my seat on the stage, I could see everything. My parents in the front row, Dad sitting straight and proud, Mom shrinking beside him. Behind them, scattered throughout the crowd, I spotted the plainclothes officers Detective Chen had promised. They looked like parents, like older siblings, like community members there to celebrate. But I could see the subtle ways they positioned themselves near the exits, the alert way they held their bodies. Detective Chen herself was standing at the back, dressed in a sundress and cardigan like a proud aunt. When our eyes met, she gave me the smallest nod. The ceremony began with all the usual pomp. The band played, the choir sang, the salutatorian gave her speech about reaching for the stars. Through it all, I held my speech cards in sweaty hands, but I knew I would not be reading from them. "And now," Principal Williams announced, "please welcome our valedictorian, Emma Richardson, who will speak to us about the foundation of success." The applause was thunderous. I stood on shaking legs and walked to the podium. The microphone seemed impossibly tall, the crowd impossibly large. 500 faces turned toward me. In the front row, my father was beaming, playing the proud parent perfectly. My mother was trying to smile, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. My classmates, their families, my teachers, the officers waiting for my signal. This was it. The moment where I had to choose between my perfect reputation and my mother's life. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emma Richardson, and I am honored to stand before you as valedictorian of the class of 2024. More applause. Dad nodded approvingly. I had a speech prepared about success, about achievement, about how we can accomplish anything with hard work and family support. But this morning, something happened that made me realize I need to tell you a different story. A true story. The applause died away. I could feel the confusion rippling through the crowd. This morning, my father strangled my mother in our kitchen. He split her lip when she tried to speak without permission, and he threatened to kill her after this ceremony. Gasps erupted across the field. Dad started to stand, his face flushing red, but Mom grabbed his arm with surprising strength, holding him in place. He could not make a scene, not here, not with everyone watching. "For 18 years," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "I have lived in a house where excellence was demanded but love was absent, where a 98% on a test meant 2% failure, where my mother has been hospitalized 17 times for accidents that were never accidents at all." "Emma!" Dad's voice cut through the stunned silence, sharp and commanding. "Stop this immediately." I looked directly at him, and for the first time in my life, I did not obey. "No, Dad. I will not stop. For 18 years, you have controlled every word we spoke, every move we made. You have built a prison of fear and called it a family. But I am 18 now, and my silence is over." He started to rise again, and I saw several of the plainclothes officers shift positions, ready to intercept. But I was not done. People ask me how I became valedictorian, how I maintained perfect grades while captaining the debate team and volunteering every weekend. Truth is, I learned to survive on 3 hours of sleep because I spent my nights listening through the walls, making sure my mother was still breathing. I studied in hospital waiting rooms. I wrote essays in the bathroom while Mom cried behind locked doors. I learned 10 different ways to cover bruises with makeup before I learned to drive. Crowd was absolutely silent now. Some people were crying. Others were recording on their phones. In the front row, my mother had started to sob, her shoulders shaking with 18 years of suppressed grief. "But I also learned something else," I said, gripping the podium. "I learned that some families are built on love, others on fear." The moment the words left my mouth, everything happened at once. Plainclothes officers moved with precision, converging on my father from all directions. He tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Detective Chen was already there, her badge out, her voice clear and professional. "Daniel Richardson, you are under arrest for domestic violence, criminal threats, and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent." "This is insane," he shouted, struggling against the officers who were cuffing him. "That is my daughter. I made her everything she is. Emma, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake." I looked at him, this man who had terrorized us for so long, now being led away in handcuffs in front of everyone who had believed his perfect father act. "The only mistake," I said into the microphone, "was staying silent for so long." Crowd erupted in chaos. Some people were applauding, others were crying, others were on their phones calling news stations. But I only had eyes for my mother, who had collapsed in her seat, victim advocates already surrounding her with blankets and water and gentle words. I walked off the stage and went to her, kneeling beside her chair. "Mom, it is over. He is gone." She looked at me with eyes that were seeing sunlight for the first time. "Emma, what have you done? Our life, our home, everything." "We will figure it out," I said, holding her hands. "We are free, Mom. We are finally free." Principal Williams had taken the microphone, trying to restore order, asking everyone to remain calm. But the ceremony was effectively over. My classmates were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to admiration to horror. Some of them would later tell me it was the bravest thing they had ever seen. Others would say I should have handled it privately, that I had ruined graduation for everyone. But as I knelt there with my mother, watching my father being driven away in a police car, I did not care about any of that. I had given up my perfect valedictorian moment, my flawless reputation, my carefully constructed image of success. And in return, I had saved my mother's life. Detective Chen approached us, kneeling down to our level. "Emma, Maria, we need to take you both to the station for statements. We have a safe house ready for you tonight and advocates who will help you through everything that comes next." "What about our things?" Mom asked, her voice small and lost. "Officers are already at your house collecting personal items. We have the recordings Emma made, the hospital records we have subpoenaed, and the neighbors who are finally ready to testify. He is not getting out anytime soon." As we were led away from the field, I heard someone slow clapping. Then another person joined. Then another. Soon the entire crowd was on their feet, applauding not for my academic achievements but for something far more difficult, breaking the silence that had protected a monster. Sarah ran up to me before we got to the police car, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, why did you never tell me?" "Because perfect families do not have problems," I said. "And the Richardson family had to be perfect." She hugged me tight. "You are the strongest person I know." But I did not feel strong as I sat in the police station, giving my statement, playing recording after recording of my father's abuse. I did not feel strong as I described 18 years of violence in clinical detail, watching the detective's face grow more horrified with each revelation. I did not feel strong as my mother broke down completely, finally able to acknowledge what had been done to her. I felt like a girl who had detonated a bomb in the middle of her life and was now standing in the rubble, uncertain how to rebuild. The safe house was a small apartment in a neighborhood I had never been to. 2 bedrooms, plain furniture, bars on the windows. It was a far cry from our 5-bedroom house in the suburbs, but it was the first place I had ever felt safe. Mom and I sat on the couch, still in our graduation clothes, neither of us quite believing it was real. "I should have left years ago," she whispered. "I should have protected you." "He would have killed you," I said. "We both know that. But you, having to see all of that, having to live with it." "Mom, stop. We cannot change the past. We can only move forward." She looked at me, really looked at me for perhaps the first time. "When did you become so strong?" "I learned from watching you survive," I said. "Every day you stayed alive, every beating you endured to protect me, every time you got back up when he knocked you down. You taught me strength, Mom, even when you thought you had none left." We held each other and cried then, 18 years of tears that had been held back by fear finally released. The next days were a blur of legal proceedings, medical examinations, and difficult decisions. The district attorney, a woman named Jennifer Martinez who had her own history with domestic violence, took our case personally. She walked us through every step, explaining how the charges would proceed, what we could expect at trial, how to file for emergency protective orders and eventually permanent restraining orders. "With the recordings Emma made, we have him dead to rights on the criminal threats," she explained. "The strangulation charge is also solid. We have the medical documentation and photos. The attempted murder charge will be harder to prove, but with your testimony and the pattern of escalation, I think we can make it stick." Dad had hired the best criminal defense attorney money could buy, of course. Bradley Hutchinson, known for getting wealthy abusers off with slaps on the wrist. But even he could not spin away the recordings, the photos, the medical records that showed a clear pattern of escalating violence over nearly 2 decades. The news had picked up the story immediately. Valedictorian exposes father's abuse during graduation speech was trending on social media. The video of my speech had gone viral with millions of views and thousands of comments. Some people called me a hero. Others said I was an attention seeker who should have handled it privately. I tried not to read any of it. What surprised me most were the people who came forward after. Teachers who said they had suspected but never had proof. Neighbors who had heard the screams but been too afraid to get involved. My father's secretary, who admitted she had covered for him when he showed up to work with bloody knuckles. Even our pastor called, apologizing for the times my mother had sought help and been told to be a better wife. "We all failed you," Mrs. Henderson from next door said when she brought us groceries to the safe house. "We all knew something was wrong and we did nothing. But someone had done something." Detective Chen visited us regularly, checking in, making sure we were safe. She told me that in 20 years of working domestic violence cases, she had rarely seen someone my age show such courage. "Most kids in your situation either repeat the cycle or run away as soon as they can," she said. "What you did, standing up publicly, making it impossible to ignore, that saved your mother's life." Statistics show that when an abuser makes a death threat, they follow through 75% of the time. Mom was struggling. Without Dad controlling every aspect of her life, she did not know how to make decisions. What to eat for dinner became an overwhelming choice. Whether to watch TV or read a book could send her into a panic. The victim advocates explained it was normal that 18 years of coercive control had eroded her ability to trust her own judgment. She started therapy immediately, sometimes having sessions twice a day. I went too, learning that what I had experienced was called complex developmental trauma, and that my hypervigilance, my inability to sleep, my constant need to be perfect were all symptoms of growing up in a war zone disguised as a home. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks after graduation. Mom and I sat in the courthouse, surrounded by advocates and prosecutors, watching as Dad was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He had lost weight, his perfect businessman facade crumbling without his expensive suits and careful grooming. When he saw us, his eyes burned with rage so pure it took my breath away. His lawyer argued for bail, claiming Dad was a pillar of the community with no flight risk. But then Ada Martinez played the recordings. The entire courtroom heard his calm voice describing how he would kill my mother. They heard the sounds of impact, her screams, his threats. Several people had to leave the room. The judge, an older woman named Patricia Crawford, looked at my father with undisguised disgust. "Mr. Richardson, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely heard such clear evidence of premeditated domestic violence. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial." Dad erupted then, screaming that we were liars, that we had set him up, that he had given us everything and this was how we repaid him. Took 3 bailiffs to drag him out, still shouting threats that would only add to his charges. Mom and I moved out of the safe house after a month, finding a small apartment near the college I would be attending. It was nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people. But it was ours and Dad had never been there, would never be there. That made it a palace. I deferred my enrollment for a semester to help Mom get on her feet. She had not worked in 18 years, had no credit in her own name, did not even know how to pay bills online. We spent hours at the kitchen table, me teaching her things most adults took for granted, both of us learning how to exist without the constant threat of violence. Trial was set for October. As it approached, the pressure intensified. Dad's family, who had been notably absent from our lives for years, suddenly appeared with offers and threats in equal measure. His brother, Uncle Richard, showed up at our apartment one evening. "Emma Maria," he said through the door we refused to open. "This has gone far enough. Daniel is prepared to give you the house, a generous settlement, whatever you need. Just drop the charges." "Go away, Richard," Mom said, her voice stronger than I had heard it in years. You are destroying our family name. Think about what this is doing to the business, to our reputation. All for what? A few arguments that got out of hand? A few arguments? I laughed bitterly through the door. He tried to kill her. Multiple times. You always were dramatic, Emma. Just like your mother. Daniel said you would do something like this, make up stories for attention. The stories are recorded, Richard. Every threat, every beating. The police have them all. He left, but others came. Dad's business partners, his golf buddies, even some family friends who had benefited from his generosity over the years. They all had the same message: drop the charges, take the money, preserve the family reputation. Some offered bribes. Others made veiled threats about how hard life could be for two women alone. We documented everything and gave it to the prosecutor, who added witness intimidation to Dad's growing list of charges. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I had to testify for 3 days, describing in excruciating detail every incident I could remember. Dad's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter angry about strict parenting, suggested my academic pressure had caused a mental breakdown, implied I had coached my mother to lie. But then they played the recordings. Hours of them. The jury heard Dad's calm voice describing how he would hurt Mom, heard the impacts, the screams, the begging. They saw the photos, 18 years of emergency room visits, bruises in various stages of healing, a catalog of violence written on my mother's body. Mom testified too, though she could barely get through it. She described the psychological torture, the financial control, the isolation from family and friends, the threats against me that kept her from leaving. She told them about the miscarriages caused by his violence, the baby brother I never got to meet because Dad had kicked her in the stomach at 5 months pregnant. The defense's case fell apart when they called character witnesses. Dad's secretary, under oath, admitted she had seen him violent in the office. A golf buddy reluctantly confirmed Dad had bragged about keeping his women in line. Even the pastor, subpoenaed by the defense, had to admit Mom had sought help multiple times and been turned away. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, aggravated assault, criminal threats, domestic battery, witness intimidation. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life, with the possibility of parole after 15. When they let him away, Dad looked at me one last time. "You destroyed this family," he said. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "You did." After the trial, life had to somehow continue. I started college in January, commuting from home to stay close to Mom. She got a job at a local library, surrounded by books and quiet people who did not ask questions about her past. She was learning to smile again, to make choices, to exist without looking over her shoulder. I struggled more than I expected at college. My peers complained about normal things, tough professors, expensive textbooks, weekend parties. I could not relate. I sat in my criminal justice classes learning about domestic violence from an academic perspective while living its aftermath. My professors praised my insights, not knowing they came from 18 years of field experience. I changed my major 3 times before settling on social work with a focus on domestic violence advocacy. My advisor tried to talk me out of it, saying it would be too triggering, too personal. But I knew this was what I was meant to do. Every paper I wrote, every case study I analyzed was preparation for helping other women like my mother, other daughters like me. Mom started dating when I was 20. His name was Robert, a gentle man who worked at the library. He moved slowly, carefully, always making sure Mom was comfortable. The first time he raised his hand to brush hair from her face, she flinched so hard she fell off her chair. He never made sudden movements after that. "I do not know if I can do this," she told me one night. "I do not know how to be with someone who does not hurt me." "You learn," I said. "Day by day you learn." I had my own struggles with relationships. Trust was nearly impossible. When my first college boyfriend raised his voice during an argument about something trivial, I had a panic attack so severe I ended up in the emergency room. The smell of whiskey made me nauseous. The sound of breaking glass sent me into hypervigilance mode that lasted for hours. My therapist, Dr. Kim, worked with me for 3 years. We processed the trauma, developed coping strategies, rewired the neural pathways that had been shaped by 18 years of fear. It was the hardest work I had ever done, harder than becoming valedictorian, harder than testifying against my father. Healing is not linear, she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. Some days you will feel like you have made no progress. But look how far you have come. You saved your mother. You broke the cycle. You found your voice. Dad tried to appeal his conviction twice. Both times, the appeals were denied. He sent letters from prison at first, alternating between apologies and threats, between proclaiming his love and detailing his revenge fantasies. We gave them all to the authorities, and eventually a no-contact order stopped them. I heard through the grapevine that he had become a model prisoner, teaching literacy classes, leading a Bible study group. Part of me wondered if he had actually changed, if prison had somehow taught him what 18 years of having a family had not. But then I would remember Mom's screams, the feel of wire against my skin on graduation day, the look in his eyes when he promised to kill her. People like him did not change. They just got better at pretending. Mom flourished in ways I never expected. She went back to school, getting her associate's degree in library science. She joined a support group for domestic violence survivors, eventually becoming a peer counselor. She bought a car, something Dad had never allowed her to do. She painted our apartment in bright colors that Dad would have hated. She was becoming the person she might have been if she had never met him. I am 43 years old, she said on her birthday, and I am just learning who I am. The graduation video continued to circulate online, becoming a touchstone for discussions about domestic violence. I was invited to speak at conferences, to share my story with other survivors, to advocate for policy changes. It was exhausting and re-traumatizing, but every time someone came up to me afterward and said, "Your story gave me the courage to leave, it was worth it." I graduated college with honors, though this time I declined to give a speech. I had said everything I needed to say 4 years earlier. Mom sat in the audience, crying happy tears, finally able to celebrate without fear. I got a job at a domestic violence shelter, working the night shift because that was when the crisis calls came in. I sat with women who had just left, who were terrified and lost and second-guessing their decision. I showed them the video of my graduation speech. "You can do this," I would tell them. "It feels impossible, but you can do this." Some went back. Statistics show that it takes an average of 7 attempts to leave an abusive relationship permanently. But some stayed gone, rebuilt their lives, found their voices. Each one who made it gave me hope. I met Marcus at a conference on trauma-informed care. He was a therapist who worked with children who had witnessed domestic violence. He understood without explanation why I needed to sit with my back to the wall in restaurants, why I checked locks obsessively, why certain sounds made me freeze. He had his own history, his own wounds. We healed together, slowly, carefully, learning to trust in ways neither of us thought possible. When he proposed, it was in the library where Mom worked, surrounded by stories of survival and hope. Mom cried when I told her, but they were complicated tears. "I am happy for you," she said. "But I am also terrified. What if?" "He is not Dad," I said firmly. "And I am not you. I mean that with all the love in the world, Mom. But we are breaking the pattern." Our wedding was small, intimate. Detective Chen came, now a captain, still working domestic violence cases. My college roommate was my maid of honor. Mom walked me down the aisle, both of us remembering another ceremony where everything had changed. During the reception, she pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something. I have been seeing someone. Really seeing them, not just dating. Her name is Patricia." I stared at her, processing this revelation. Her. I know it is a shock. It is a shock to me, too. But she makes me feel safe in a way I never thought possible. She is gentle and kind, and Mom was crying now. She would never hurt me. Never. I hugged her tight. Mom, you deserve all the happiness in the world. All of it. Dad died in prison when I was 27. Heart attack during a basketball game. The warden called to inform us, his voice professionally neutral. Mom and I sat with the news, unsure how to feel. Relief? Sadness? Anger that he had escaped justice by dying? I thought I would feel free when he died, Mom said. But I realize I have been free since the day you stood at that podium. We did not go to the funeral. His family buried him quietly, the obituary making no mention of his crimes, painting him as a successful businessman taken too soon. But the truth lived on in court records, in news archives, in the video that still circulated as a testament to the power of breaking silence. I had my first child at 30, a daughter we named Sarah after Detective Chen. When I held her for the first time, I made her a promise. You will never know fear in your own home. You will never have to choose between safety and family. You will grow up with a voice and the absolute certainty that it deserves to be heard. Marcus was the father Dad never was, patient, gentle, present. He read to Sarah every night, taught her to question everything, to stand up for herself and others. When she had nightmares, he sat with her until dawn, never once complaining about lost sleep. Mom lived with us for a while after Sarah was born, helping with the baby but also healing something in herself by being the grandmother she wished she could have been as a mother. She sang lullabies she had been too frightened to sing to me, played games that had been forbidden in our house, laughed without looking over her shoulder. This is what it should have been like, she said one evening, watching Marcus dance around the kitchen with Sarah on his hip. This is what we deserved. This is what we have now, I reminded her. That is what matters. When Sarah was 5, old enough to understand simple concepts, I started teaching her about body autonomy, about good touches and bad touches, about trusting her instincts. I taught her that no one, not even family, especially not family, had the right to hurt her. I taught her that secrets that made her feel bad were never okay to keep. Mommy, she asked one day, why does Grandma sometimes cry when she is happy? Because Grandma had to be very brave for a very long time, I explained. And sometimes when you have been brave for too long, happiness feels so big it comes out as tears. Were you brave too, Mommy? I tried to be. I want to be brave like you and Grandma. You already are, baby. You already are. I continued working at the shelter, eventually becoming the director. We expanded services, added programs for children who had witnessed violence, created support groups for teenage girls in abusive dating relationships. Every woman who walked through our doors reminded me that my story was not unique, that countless families lived in the shadow of violence. But I also saw hope. Women leaving, staying gone, rebuilding. Children breaking cycles, refusing to perpetuate the violence they had witnessed. Men learning to be better, to recognize the patterns they had inherited and consciously choose different paths. It was slow work, often heartbreaking but essential. The video of my graduation speech became part of our training materials for new advocates. This is what courage looks like, I would tell them. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Every survivor who walks through our doors has this same courage. Our job is to help them find it. Marcus and I had 2 more children, boys we were determined to raise as feminists, as allies, as men who would never use their strength to harm. We taught them about consent from the earliest age, about emotional intelligence, about the strength it took to be vulnerable. They grew up seeing their father cry at movies, watching him cook and clean without being asked, witnessing a partnership built on mutual respect rather than dominance. Mom eventually moved in with Patricia, creating a life full of the peace she had never known. They traveled, took cooking classes, volunteered at the shelter together. Patricia had her own history of trauma, and together they created a love built on understanding, on gentleness, on the radical act of choosing joy after so much pain. I never thought I would be happy, Mom told me on her 60th birthday. I thought the best I could hope for was to survive. But look at me now. I am thriving. The shelter created an annual scholarship in my name for young women escaping domestic violence who wanted to pursue higher education. Every year, I presented it at a ceremony, telling my story again, watching young women nod in recognition, seeing themselves in my words. One recipient, a girl named Jessica who had testified against her stepfather at 17, pulled me aside after the ceremony. "Did it ever stop haunting you?" she asked. "The fear, the memories, the what-ifs?" "No," I told her honestly. "But it becomes a haunting you can live with. The ghosts become quieter, less insistent. You build a life so full of light that the shadows have less power. And eventually you realize that surviving made you who you are, and you would not trade who you are for an easier past." She nodded, understanding in a way only another survivor could. When Sarah turned 18, the same age I had been when I gave that speech, she asked to see the video. We watched it together, Mom, Marcus, and I, seeing that terrified but determined girl stand at a podium and change everything. "You were so young," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "How did you do it?" "I did not have a choice," I said. Or rather, the only choice was between speaking up or letting him kill her. When those are your options, you find courage you did not know existed. "I am proud of you, Mom. Both of you," she looked at her grandmother too. "You survived something unsurvivable." "We did more than survive," Mom said. "We learned to live." Sarah went on to study law, specializing in domestic violence prosecution. My sons became counselors and teachers, carrying the lessons of their childhood into careers focused on helping others. They all understood that violence was a cycle that could be broken, that silence was complicity, that speaking truth to power sometimes meant standing at a podium on what should be your happiest day and setting your whole world on fire. I retired from the shelter at 55, the same age Mom had been when she finally felt safe. But I never stopped advocating, never stopped telling the story, never stopped believing that one voice could spark change. Sometimes I got letters from women who had seen the video years ago and finally found the courage to leave. They sent pictures of their new lives, apartments with their names on the lease, diplomas earned in their 40s, children growing up without fear. Each letter was a reminder that courage was contagious, that breaking silence gave others permission to find their voices too. The high school where I graduated invited me back to speak at their 25th anniversary of that infamous graduation. Principal who had been there that day, Mrs. Williams, was retiring. She introduced me with tears in her eyes. 25 years ago, Emma Richardson taught us all that sometimes the most important speeches are the ones we do not plan, she said. She showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than fear. I stood at the same podium where my life had changed, looking out at a new generation of faces. Some of them knew the story, had watched the video in health class or found it online. Others were hearing it for the first time. But all of them needed to know that their voices mattered, that silence in the face of abuse was not neutral, that sometimes saving a life meant risking everything you had built. "My name is Emma Richardson Collins," I began. 30 years ago, I stood at this podium as an 18-year-old girl and made a choice that changed everything. I chose my mother's life over my reputation. I chose truth over comfort. I chose to break a silence that had protected a monster for 18 years. I told them the whole story, not just the dramatic moment, but the years of recovery, the work of healing, the daily choice to build something beautiful from the rubble of trauma. I told them about Mom's journey, about learning to trust again, about raising children who would never know the fear we had lived with. "Some of you are sitting in this audience with secrets," I said, looking at the young faces before me. "Some of you go home to violence, to fear, to situations that feel inescapable. I am here to tell you that you have more power than you know. Your voice, your truth, your courage to speak can change everything. It will not be easy. It will cost you things you value. But silence costs more. Silence costs lives." After the speech, a girl approached me, maybe 16, with bruises poorly hidden under concealer. "My mom," she whispered. "My dad hurts my mom." I gave her my card, Detective Chen's number, she was chief of police now, and the shelter hotline. You do not have to do this alone, I told her. There are people ready to help. 3 weeks later, I heard that a girl had worn a wire to record her father's threats and turned them over to the police. Her mother was safe. The cycle was breaking again. That is the thing about courage, it spreads. One voice becomes two, becomes dozens, becomes hundreds. The video of my graduation speech has been viewed over 50 million times now. It has been translated into dozens of languages, shown in courtrooms as evidence of the power of documentation, used in psychology classes to demonstrate trauma response. But more importantly, it has reached women and girls who needed to hear that they were not alone, that survival was possible, that their voices mattered. Every view represents a potential life changed, a possible cycle broken, a chance for someone to choose differently. Mom lived to be 83, passing peacefully in her sleep with Patricia holding her hand. At her funeral, the chapel was packed with women she had helped through her support group, families who had found hope in her story, young advocates who saw her as a mentor and inspiration. She survived the unsurvivable, I said at her eulogy. And then she did something even harder. She learned to thrive. She taught us that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be, that love after trauma is not just possible but revolutionary, that choosing joy after abuse is the ultimate act of resistance. Sarah spoke too, my brilliant daughter who had grown up safe because of the choice I made at 18. My grandmother's life was divided into 2 parts, before and after. For 25 years she lived in fear. For the next 40, she lived in freedom. She made sure her granddaughters and grandsons would never know the first part, only the second. That is her greatest legacy. Now I am 70, a grandmother myself, watching my grandchildren grow up in homes filled with love and respect. Sometimes I struggle to reconcile the girl who stood at that podium with the woman I have become. That terrified 18-year-old feels like a different person, someone I knew once but can barely remember. But then I will smell whiskey, or hear a certain tone of voice, or see a woman with that particular hollow look that comes from living with violence, and I am right back there. The hypervigilance never fully goes away. The body keeps the score, as they say. My nervous system still remembers danger even though the danger has been gone for decades. What I have learned is that trauma is not something you overcome once and move past. It is something you carry, something that becomes part of your story but does not have to define your story. Every day is a choice to not let the violence I witnessed and experienced become the violence I perpetuate. The young women at the shelter now look at me like I am some kind of legend, the girl from the video who changed everything. But I know the truth. I was just a desperate daughter trying to save her mother's life. Courage people see was really just terror transformed into action. The strength they admire was just the absence of any other option. How do I know when it is time to leave, they ask me. How do I know when enough is enough? If you are asking the question, you already know the answer, I tell them. The hard part is not knowing. The hard part is doing. Some of them remind me so much of myself at that age, hypervigilant, perfectionist, trying to control everything because their home life is so chaotic. They excel at school or work because achievement is the only thing they can control. They take care of everyone else because no one takes care of them. They minimize the abuse because admitting its severity would mean admitting they need to leave, and leaving feels impossible. I cannot leave, they say. He will kill me if I leave. He will kill you if you stay, I respond gently. The only difference is whether it happens quickly or slowly, whether your children watch it happen, whether you get a chance to build something else first. It is harsh, but it is true. The statistics do not lie. Domestic violence escalates. Death threats are usually followed by attempts. Triangulation is the #1 predictor of eventual homicide. These women need truth more than they need comfort. But I also give them hope. I show them pictures of my family, my children who grew up safe, my grandchildren who have never heard violence in their homes. I tell them about Mom learning to paint at 65, traveling to Europe at 70, finding love that did not hurt. I share stories of other survivors who went back to school, started businesses, found careers, built lives that would have seemed impossible when they were trapped. The leaving is the hardest part, I tell them. Everything after that, even when it is difficult, is easier than staying. Sometimes their abusers remind me so much of my father, charming in public, monsters in private, using financial control and isolation to maintain power. They all seem to read from the same playbook, use the same tactics, make the same threats. It is almost boring how predictable they are, how unoriginal their cruelty is. But knowing the patterns helps. I can tell the women what to expect, how their abuser will likely respond, what extinction burst behaviors to watch for. I can prepare them for the love bombing that often follows the initial separation, the suicide threats, the promises to change, the sudden involvement of family members who never cared before. He is saying he will kill himself if I do not come back, they tell me, panic in their voices. That is his choice, not your responsibility, I say firmly. And statistically, abusers who threaten suicide rarely follow through. It is a control tactic, not a genuine cry for help. The hardest cases are the ones who go back. I watch them leave the shelter with their abuser, see the defeat in their eyes, know that statistically their risk of homicide just increased exponentially. But I also know that leaving is a process, not an event, that it takes an average of 7 attempts, that each time they leave they get a little stronger, a little more prepared for the final break. Some of them never make it out. I have been to too many funerals, spoken at too many vigils, held too many children who became orphans because their father killed their mother. Each death feels like a personal failure, even though I know I cannot save everyone. You did what you could, Marcus tells me after particularly hard losses. You gave them options. You cannot make their choices for them. He is right, but it does not ease the weight of it. Every woman who dies at the hands of her abuser is a reminder of what almost happened to my mother. What would have happened if I had not spoken up that day? The video continues to surface in unexpected places. A few years ago, a young woman in India translated my story and used it to advocate for domestic violence legislation. A theater company in Chicago turned it into a play with my permission, using it to raise funds for local shelters. A documentary filmmaker interviewed me for a series on moments that changed lives, intercutting the original video with interviews from women it had inspired to leave. Do you ever regret it? The filmmaker asked. Making such a private matter so public? I regret that it was necessary, I answered. I regret that it took a public spectacle to get help. But I do not regret speaking up. Silence would have been a death sentence for my mother and a life sentence for me. As I write this, Sarah just called to tell me she is pregnant with her first child. The cycle continues, but it is a different cycle now, one of strength, resilience, and the absolute certainty that violence has no place in a home. I want to name her Emma if it is a girl, she said. After the bravest woman I know. Name her after your grandmother instead, I suggested. Maria. She was the brave one. She survived 18 years of hell and still managed to raise a daughter who knew she deserved better. That takes a kind of courage I cannot even imagine. Mom would have loved to see her great-grandchild, to know that her story did not end with violence but continued through generations of women who would never accept abuse as the price of love. She would have been proud of how far we have come from that morning when my father's hands were around her throat, when death seemed like the only escape from the prison he had built. I think about that morning often, how it started like so many others with violence over breakfast, threats over coffee. How it could have ended like so many others with Mom silently nursing her wounds while I pretended not to see. How one decision, one text to Detective Chen, one wire hidden under a graduation dress, changed the trajectory of multiple lives. People sometimes ask me if I think my father ever felt remorse, if prison changed him, if he died understanding the harm he had caused. Truth is, I do not know and I do not care. His redemption or lack thereof was not my responsibility. My responsibility was to my mother, to myself, to the children I would someday have, to the cycles that needed breaking. What I know is this: violence thrives in silence, in shame, in the shadows of family secrets. Depends on victims being too afraid, too ashamed, too isolated to speak up. Counts on communities looking the other way, on institutions failing to respond, on the complicity of those who know but do nothing. But courage is contagious. Truth has power. And sometimes, one voice at one moment can shatter years of silence and change everything. My name is Emma Richardson Collins. I am 70 years old. 52 years ago, I stood at a podium and made a choice that saved my mother's life and transformed my own. It was the hardest thing I had ever done and the most important thing I would ever do. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, who lives with violence or loves someone who does, know this: your voice matters. Your truth deserves to be heard. The fear you feel is real, but it is not bigger than your right to safety, to peace, to a life without violence. It will not be easy. You will lose things you value. People will judge you, blame you, tell you it was not that bad or that you should have handled it differently. Path forward will be uncertain and often terrifying. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that broken silence is the chance to build something new, something safe, something worthy of you and those you love. You do not have to do it the way I did, with a public spectacle that goes viral. You can leave quietly, safely, with the help of professionals who know how to protect you. You can call the hotline, go to the shelter, reach out to someone you trust. You can take small steps or giant leaps. The how matters less than the decision to go, to speak, to choose yourself over the violence. Some families are built on love. Others are built on fear. You deserve the first kind. We all do. And if no one else has told you this, let me be the first. You are brave enough. You are strong enough. You deserve safety, peace, and love that does not hurt. Your voice matters, your life matters, and the world needs you alive and free. That is what I would tell my 18-year-old self if I could. That is what I tell every woman who walks through the shelter doors. That is what I hope my granddaughter will never need to hear but will always know. That she has a voice, that it deserves to be heard, and that silence in the face of violence is never the answer. The graduation video ends with me walking off the stage toward my mother, but that was not an ending. It was a beginning. The beginning of healing, of learning to live without fear, of discovering who we could be when we were not just trying to survive. 52 years later, I can say this: it was worth it. Every moment of fear, every difficult conversation, every sleepless night was worth it to build a life free from violence, to raise children who knew only safety, to help other women find their voices. My mother lived 40 years in freedom because of one moment of courage. Hundreds of women found safety because one video gave them permission to speak. Multiple generations will grow up without violence because one 18-year-old girl chose truth over silence. That is the power of breaking silence. That is the legacy of speaking truth. That is why, despite everything it cost, I would do it again. My name is Emma Richardson Collins. I was the girl at the podium. But more importantly, I am one of millions of women who chose to break the cycle, who refused to let violence have the last word, who learned that survival was not enough, we deserved to thrive. And we did. Against all odds, despite everything, we did. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for bearing witness to the transformation that is possible when we refuse to stay silent. And if you are living with violence, please know that your story does not have to end the way it began. There is help. There is hope. There is a life waiting for you on the other side of fear. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it. And you are. Even if you do not know it yet, you are. Thank you for listening to my story of finding my voice when I thought I had lost it forever. I have left 2 more stories on your screen, both from young women who learned that sometimes the hardest battle is against the people who were supposed to protect you. Click on whichever one resonates with your heart. And if you want to join our sisterhood of survivors who refuse to stay silent, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your voice is your power, and it is never too late to use it.